new funding
Sometimes I can
source,
get some
which
things
would go in
scheduled
impact
to
fees, but they haven't
explain it.
wanted to take on sort of that
Yeah,
methodology yet. I don't think it's going to be that hard. Coming out of next week, they should have a full list of oriented projects. And then all we have to do is sum the total, figure out what our market reduction factor is and what we're dividing it by. And then we'll have a new
So funny, you can't find
impact fee, which will be new
New
revenue.
revenue impact fee.
Woodinville usually
It
has
is.
a pretty good selection. You sell there.
Well, developer contribution might be, developer contribution might be the portion of the capital project that's not being paid by impact fees that the developers
I mean, it's
actually
their own brand one.
building. We don't get it.
That's what I don't understand.
Developer contributions.
It was actually Kirkland brand.
Kind of funny.
Okay.
And then I did the.
It's
conscious. I was like, okay.
Gotcha.
So that's what that is.
That's
Gotcha.
easier. Oh.
Yeah, I don't- everybody else in-
Oh, we're powerless too. Oh, we're powerless
See if
too.
we looked at.
Oh,
I
wait.
just kept counting on it.
Okay, well, it's
the
good.
light, just the
It's,
light.
yeah, it's
Hey,
good.
Ryan, if you're
It's good.
non-compliant.
You just
All
can't
right,
see-
let's get this meeting
This
started.
one
We're gonna have
say
a
something.
Lake Stevens City Council workshop tonight. It is the 2nd of July, 2024. We are recording this as well, and it will end up on our YouTube channel. With that, I will hand the reins over to Council President Peter Shagan.
Thank you, Mayor Gailey. Just for the record, Councilmember Tadgett and Councilmember Jorstad will not be here tonight. But with that, let's get started. Russ, I think you're first up on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, council. Russ Wright, Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens. I have Christy Schmidt with me, our planning manager tonight, and we are going to go over our Q2 report. This is something we started doing about a year ago. Council had asked that we keep you abreast at what's happening with Planning Commission and generally what's happening with the department and some big accomplishments. So the big thing that we've been working on, as you know, is the comprehensive plan update. We've been working on it for about a year since last summer. Have had a significant amount of open houses, workshops, et cetera, with the Planning Commission. At this point, they've reviewed, I believe, all of the elements, maybe not the capital facilities plan, but they've definitely reviewed the goals and policies for each plan. Particular emphasis this year is how do we integrate climate sustainability and a couple of other newer issues. So they've really gone through the plan. They've been very diligent, provided some good feedback. And we've had one workshop with the city council, and then we will bring forward some other ones. What that means with the rest of the long range work program is we've had to set aside some of the code amendments. We thought we'd be a little further along with the comp plan and be into sort of the implementation phase already. We're not quite there, but we were able to complete a couple of outstanding code amendments, including the solicitor's license, the update to the building code. And then we have a number of other things that will come online at the second half of this year, probably in the Q4. Again, those would all be implementation pieces, looking at updates to our transportation and streets code, looking at our housing code, making some soft adjustments. So that program has been moving along pretty well, and I think we're in really good shape. The other thing I'm going to touch on is sort of some economic development things we've been doing. Council had set out some priority projects, so we've been working on those, one being the city campus. We have issued requests for proposals for the city campus, at least for phase one, which would be the council chambers, as well as a infrastructure analysis for the entire site. So we should be getting applications back on that in the next couple of weeks. Then we will rank those. Likewise, we issued the request for proposals for the museum design. We did receive 3 proposals back, and we have scored those, including Councilmember Peter Sagan helped with that scoring. So that was really good. We have a preferred consultant and we're in contract negotiation right now. So that project's moving forward. We've been working on some branding efforts. We brought the 91st Street beautification plan to you, and we have reached back out to the consultant to make a couple of those changes that you've asked for. We've also worked on the flag as a part of our branding efforts and a few other smaller tasks. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Christy, and she's going to talk about some of our process improvements and what we're doing with our permits.
All right. Thank you, Russ. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Well, in case you wonder what's been going on in the permit world since the adoption of the IBC 2021 code back on March 6th, it's been a success. We have received 544 permits total that we've processed during that time frame. If you want to break it down, that's about 63 permits a month. So with our small staff, that's keeping us busy. Part of that breakdown includes 188 building permits during that time frame, and that includes 58 land use development applications. So if you break that down per planner, that's 12 new projects per planner just this last quarter. As far as services go to our community, we've helped increase revenues by we've issued certificate of occupancy for 6 new commercial buildings, which is great news. Our code enforcement department, we have a one-man show. He's been very busy. He actually closed successfully 54 cases, which is great news, and has opened 11 new ones. So that shows a lot of community outreach and education on his part. Also, we held just last week our biannual retreat for our department with the Building and Planning Services. This is where we're really hitting and touching base on how do we improve our development services to our community. The 3 things we're focusing on is consistency, efficiency, and predictability. That's what we want for our developers, for our staff, and our residents. Our building official worked through the lean improvement process with the fire department, police to work on the process for code enforcement for the fire lane parking issues, which many of you have been involved in. That was a very political issue with our residents. That process has been tested and it is now in action, and it's been working very efficiently. We did have the passage of the Senate Bill 5290, it's a big deal for all the cities in Washington State who plan underneath the Growth Management Act. What does that mean? It means we have reduced permit processing timeframes. This has been requested by our development community. So in taking a look at this, how do we improve our system here at Lake Stevens? We're taking an inside-out approach. We've asked developers, what can we do to improve it? We've looked at the Senate bill. We've researched software, so we are fine-tuning our software, adjusting our review timeframes. Along with that, we're updating all our external forms and our internal review process checklists. So it'll make it easier, faster for staff and for the applicant. So if you come in to submit a permit, you're going to see reduced forms, easier applications, handouts, Q&As, and quicker review times. Let's see. In addition, we have electronic books for the building department, which is great. They can provide a quicker response to people in the field, and digital code sections and citations right there. And let's see, we've had some really good staff successes with training and certifications. We now have a fully certified planning department for AICP with our planners, which is wonderful. So we're all nationally accredited. And the building department also has received many certs and trainings this just past couple months. So we're really seeing a huge progress and improvement with staff in our process. Hopefully next quarter we'll be back for stay tuned, because 2024 is our practice year. 2025 is when we have to start reporting to the state on our review timeframes. So it's a lot, but we're making a lot of progress, and we have a good staff to do that with. Thank you.
Any questions from the council tonight?
Any questions?
I do. As far as the code enforcement, how many of those cases that are closed or that are involved involve people who are not in a position to remedy their situation due to their personal circumstances, like they're physically unable or have some other limitation that prevents them from bringing whatever the issue is into compliance. And what do we do to help mitigate those situations?
That is not a metric we track. I can say anecdotally, we will get maybe one person a year
Okay.
or so that says, hey, I have some issue. And it's really the same process that we offer what we call voluntary compliance. And if someone agrees to voluntary compliance, we're really very flexible with how do you achieve compliance, work with them on timeframes, et cetera. And if they don't really go through voluntary compliance, there's really not another avenue to give them a lot of leeway, because then it's gone into sort of a legal framework. But that isn't extraordinary circumstances aren't an excuse, though, to not be compliant. But we do try to work with people, all people, through the code enforcement process, at least during that first phase.
Okay. So
I would like to add, though, Councilmember Ewing, that we do have a list of social services and resources that we can offer to them, and we do when need does arise. The outside agencies can assist.
okay. That's what I'm getting at. I'm just thinking our HOA recently, we've had two people that are not in compliance with, things. And so when contacted, they were in a situation where they were not in a position to be able to address the situation. And so, we were able to secure volunteers to help remedy that situation, to mitigate that. And I know Mayor's always talking about serving and, our neighbor and helping out. So in that spirit, if there's an opportunity, we can put that out there where people say, hey, someone's in a situation, they could use some help. If that's something that's not an undue burden on staff or others, that would be something that I'd love to see considered.
Thank you.
As kind of a distant follow-up to Councilmember Ewing's question, what do we do in the case of graffiti where we ask the property owner to clean that up and they don't? What happens then?
Again, I will give you a partial answer. I don't know of a circumstance where a property owner has not been compliant.
Okay.
Usually it seems like they are taking care of graffiti on private properties. If they didn't, we would follow the process to compel them to do that, which would again start with voluntary correction and then work its way up to a notice of violation, which could carry penalties.
Okay.
But that's not the goal. I mean,
It's great to hear your community is helping out, I guess. So, I mean, just driving around, we obviously don't have much of a problem compared to other municipalities. So that's great to see. The other question I have for you is, Russ, you indicated on your report here that you've provided interlocal or comments on the interlocal agreement with the city of Everett. Have we made any progress in regards to that water line issue?
I would say we've made pretty significant strides. We are at a point that we are agreeing with the city of Everett that there could be some parking across a portion of the water line, on the north 30 feet of the water line. So that's a pretty big contribution from them. We still have a few issues we're working through, namely they would really like to have additional areas dedicated as setback, buffer, transition area. It sort of gets renamed through the process, but we're pretty adamant that we would support a setback, a 10-foot setback from the edge of the easement to allow for construction, future maintenance, but we're not willing to provide a 50-foot wide buffer from that. So that's kind of where we are with our negotiations. We had submitted comments to them. It's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point. And the next step we're hoping is getting a meeting scheduled with their staff and maybe some of their elected folks to get to the finish line.
Okay, great. Positive comments. So any other questions, comments, council? Not at this time. Okay, thank you, Russ. Thank you, Christy. With that, Aaron, is Aaron back? No, Curtis,
You me today.
you're up, man.
All right. See that? Did that go through? All right, good evening, council. My name is Curtis Clifton. I'm a Public Works Operations Manager. Tonight, I'm here to follow up from the previous presentation that we came to you with about a month ago, asking for a dedicated facilities department. So just to touch brief on what we talked about last time, we addressed the current state and growth of our facilities, the challenges we're facing, and the outstanding work orders, some of the countermeasures that we have implemented to try to alleviate the amount of work that's coming in and keep up with it, and offered some solutions and a few analysis. So what we got from the last conversation was these 4 questions. And my hope tonight is that I can answer these questions for you. And so if you have any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to stop me and ask away. So why does the city need a facilities division of public works rather than a dedicated 2 employees to their work on facilities? Early on, the streets division took care of facilities issues. We were small enough, had a small enough amount of facilities. It was feasible for us to just take 2 employees from the streets division and say, hey, go take care of these issues. And then when you're done with them, you'll go back to the streets issues. We're finding that's no longer the case with the growth that we've had over the years. The amount of facilities that we've acquired, and with now that we have our asset management system, we're able to track the trends and the amount of facility specific work that's coming in. And we were just finding that we weren't able to keep up. So early on, when we implemented ViewWorks, we were running off the model that I first stated, where when work came in, we would just pull 2 individuals from the streets crew and assign them that work. And we were finding that there were many inconsistencies. Mainly, we weren't sending the same 2 people each time. They may not be familiar, depending on how recent we purchased the facility. If it was a matter of, hey, so-and-so, go touch up this wall with paint, they didn't know where the paint was located, what the color match was. They were spending more time than they needed to just to get what should be a simple job completed. And we're finding between the 2 of them, if there were 2 at the time, they were on average getting about 3 work orders done a day. Now, that's an average. It can range depending on the type of work that's being requested. It could take a little longer. Sometimes it would take less. But on average, we were finding individually, it was 1.5 work orders a day that they were completing. So this is how we are currently. So 9 months ago, we decided to dedicate 2 employees to strictly facilities needs. And we've been paying them since then out of class pay. And what we found was we're able to get some more consistency. They were becoming more familiar with the facilities themselves, and hence they were able to complete on average more work orders, about just over 4 a day. And what we're proposing is to make these 2 positions permanent thing. And we don't really anticipate much of a budget impact if we go this route. We've had some salary savings with vacant positions, mainly the inventory control specialist. We decided not to fill at this time. So like I said, we don't anticipate there being much of an impact. And what we also found with the trends is we weren't quite getting caught up as quickly as we wanted to, but we were seeing improvement with this current model of having 2 dedicated employees. So what we would propose in the future is for 2025, we would have the facilities supervisor and the facilities lead. And then mid-year of 25, potentially bringing in a maintenance worker. And if the trends stay consistent as far as the amount of average work done per day, we could get roughly 6 work orders done a day. and be caught up if everything stays on the trajectory that we're currently on. So how many work orders can an employee complete? And so hopefully I answered that. And what are some of the nature, what's the nature of some of those work orders? And these are just a few examples of the work orders that come in. We have quite a few from PD needing various things. We do maintain in-house the landscaping at the library. We've had requests for things in the mill to address the sap leaching from the wood here. Installing a double check and a fill station for here at Festival Street for Aquafest and for the farmers markets. We have annual inspections of our fire extinguishers and our monitoring system. So, and then various office requests, building or taking down office stations or improving them or expanding them. So can we just keep paying out of class pay for employees? Technically, yes, but we don't feel that that's the right thing to do. So what we have here is the employee handbook outlining what constitutes the out of class pay, and then below is the collective bargaining agreement. Now, the represented employees do not fall under the employee handbook. But for the sake of consistency, we would recommend that we pay them for what they're doing. And right now, they're getting the 5%, but in theory, they're doing a lot more work, and we want to compensate them for that. How do we know, and this was a big one, how do we know that what is needed by bringing the facilities up to standard without comprehensive facilities assessment? So the numbers that we have given you as far as the amount of work is strictly based off of what has come in through our asset management system. So we know we're not able to currently keep up with the demand of work that's out there. We do have the assessment scheduled for later this month, tentatively early August. It's been my experience that when I've had an inspection done on any of my homes, it doesn't result in less work for me to do to those facilities. So I think it's safe to say that we can anticipate we're going to have more work ahead of us once this assessment's done. So in summary, we've talked about the amount of facilities we've had, the need for this department. At the end of the day, we want to provide a high level of service, both for the employees that work here and for the citizens that use our facilities. And we don't really anticipate, like I mentioned, much of an impact, if at all, to the 2024 budget if the council agrees with this proposal to make these permanent positions. And one thing I also wanted to add was, as far as the span of control, the current supervisor we have, he's overseeing 9 full-time employees. And at any point in the year, depending on the amount of seasonals we have, it could be upwards to 11 or 12. And he's taking in all these service requests, both streets and facilities, vetting them, creating them, prioritizing them, and creating work orders out of that. That's a substantial workload for him, to where if we have this dedicated facilities division, he will be able to focus strictly on the streets issues, and we'll have a supervisor that can focus strictly on the facilities issues. So I think we'd be getting the best of both worlds, where we should see improvement in the level of service as far as streets is concerned, and we would see an improvement on the customer service and the amount of work that we're able to do in the facilities. So that's all I had, pretty quick. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have, excuse me, quick question. So one thing I just wanted to follow up on, in your tables here, you list 200 working days a year for the lead and the supervisor. And just did a quick online search here, coming up with about 250 to 260 working days during the year. So I'm just curious why the 200 in those boxes.
I did not get that answer. Mr. Halverson presented or created this, so I wasn't able to get that answered.
if I may, I believe it accounts for people take sick days and vacation and it's accounting for people just working regularly.
But 50 to 60 days.
13 paid holidays.
So, I mean, so I'm looking at it right here, accounting for holidays, roughly 250 work days. So that would still leave 50 days per person a year sick and vacation, which maybe is possible with it. I mean, if I'm thinking about that right, that seems kind of high.
Yeah, I can, when he gets back, I can follow up with him on where he was at with these numbers.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I ask is just because if we're talking about the ability to process these requests and how many we can get done, the number of days work obviously matters. So, okay, thank you.
I guess, is there anything from a capital standpoint that we can do to limit the labor output, as far as the maintenance goes? What I'm thinking of out loud is, like the medians we have, like the gravel, the big chunks of rocks in there,
Mhm.
and they're like full of weeds. Other municipalities have that as concrete, like stamped concrete. And so it like reduces the maintenance requirement, to do that. So you don't have to treat it chemically or manually or whatever, however you do that. That's one example, and I don't know, I'm not a maintenance guy. So, and I'm just thinking out loud, if there's something that we can do to allocate resources to make sure that we maybe pay a little bit more upfront, but save on labor costs, in the long run.
Yeah, and with this approach, and I think, I don't know if I failed to mention this, it's what we were calling the hybrid approach to where, yes, we would implement a contracting factor into this. We would try to do as much of the day-to-day stuff in-house, but we know that there's just gonna be stuff that we're gonna have to contract out. And I anticipate we'll probably see that when the assessment comes in.
So I guess I don't think I heard the answer to my question. So if there's something, it may not be an answer right now, but if there's something that a capital outlay for something we can do to improve our 100,000 square feet or whatever we have of facilities or other things that we're trying to maintain, if there's things that we can do or equipment we can acquire to make the use of the labor more efficient. Labor is expensive, right?
Right.
So if there's anything we can do to improve those efficiencies, either through capital outlay or through acquisition of tools or equipment, that's certainly something to be considered so we can, be good stewards of our resources.
And we can look into that.
Yeah, and I think as we do new projects, one of the things we've noticed in some of our old projects, such as the South Lake Stevens Trail, is that's like very maintenance heavy. Right? So as we do new capital projects, what can we do to reduce the maintenance? So you're exactly right, more concrete for everybody or whatever it is, right? Something that, whatever we can do to mitigate having to spend a lot of man hours on labor.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
We had talked about some of the maintenance issues being contracted out, and we had some difficulty with, I think, our union discussions on that. So I guess how likely is that to happen when you talk about in the future contracting some of these maintenance issues out?
Yes, it is written into the contract that we have to give the union notice. I've done it twice so far with the new contract and I haven't run into any issues. They have 30 days to respond and it's been anywhere from a week to 2 weeks that they say, okay, thank you for the notice. We don't have any issue with that.
Okay.
Just as an aside, to get a new department in this city usually takes 13 years. So I don't know about this. It took us 13 years to get a parks
We need
department.
to talk about it longer.
Yeah, we might need to talk about this a lot longer.
Let's put that on the
That should only be
2028
6 years.
Yeah.
workshop.
It took us a long time to talk about parks department, about 13 years.
So you want it on the retreat?
Yeah, let's get it on a retreat. And and put it on the 27 retreat.
Okay.
Well, let's have some more meetings in our facilities.
Yeah.
To have-
And deteriorate them
Decide
more.
if we need facilities.
Councilmember Donahue, can I answer your question regarding the averages? I just ran a couple of employees and one is at about 38 and the other is about 50. So I just ran 2 employees and that is the number, the working days off
Okay,
minus the 260. So.
oh, thank you. No.
Nice. Yeah.
So council, do you have any more questions or do you want to bring this forward at the, I guess, thumbs up, thumbs down, next council meeting or move this forward or,
I think we need to move it forward.
okay?
I'll give one for Marcus too,
Okay.
Where's Angie's?
or Angie.
So I guess that gives clear direction, right?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Curtis. All right, with that, moving along, weir replacement and Lower Stevens Creek project update. Shannon?
Just one moment. Oh, right here, stop sharing. Kind of in the corner over here, would it be preferred if I come stand up there?
Yeah, we can't, you know, that little soft voice back there.
Okay, I thought I was maybe a little too hidden and I would offer coming up here in front of everything. Because I guess they're close. Yeah. Mic check. Is that good? Okay. So good evening, council and mayor. My name is Shannon Franck. I'm the surface water manager for the city. Tonight, I'm going to give you an update on the weir replacement project and just kind of an overall update of the Lower Stevens Creek projects in general. And my screen, okay. So I just want to start by giving a little bit of a history of the weir. This will kind of come into the discussion later about why do we even have it and why do we want to use it to maintain the lake level. I want to go over where are we at with the weir now. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now. So I'll give you a status update on where we're at with this project. What are the different options that we've looked at and what kind of discussions have we had with our agency stakeholders? And how have we looked at these different options and how does it impact how we manage the lake level and how do we manage the habitat that the lake provides? And I'll just kind of go over through some comparison of these different weir design options. And then I really want to talk with you about a couple issues that have come up that are some just worth sharing and worth future discussion. A little bit of history. So the outlet channel where it sits now in its existing flow path over here in North Cove Park, that was constructed in the early 1900s. That was constructed by the Rucker brothers for the mill. The historic outfall, which many of you know, was actually closer to 16th Street by the Boys and Girls Club, kind of meandered through the wetlands that we have here today, north of Hartford Drive, and then joined Catherine Creek. When the mill was deconstructed, the lake was mainly used as a resort community. In that time frame between the 1920s and the 1950s, we started to see a lot of high peaks in flow in the winter months. So the elevation of the lake would come way up, and then we would see in the summer that it would come down. And I say way up and way down, I'm talking about likely a couple feet, but that really made an impact for the people that lived around the lake. When you have these really high flows and you have those high lake levels in the winter, people's ducks were starting to go underwater, or the infrastructure around the lake, they were starting to see flooding. And so everybody started to kind of construct up higher to maintain that higher lake level in the winter. And then summer would come and the lake level would drop. And so then there was this concern of what we see today. The lake level's too low. We're having challenges using our infrastructure there on the lake. And so some of the anecdotal information I've received about how did the lake level start was it was kind of started to be dammed with trees and branches and whatever it could to keep that lake level up so that people could use their infrastructure around the lake. And it was actually a little bit, so I've been told, a battle between the water ski club and residents, because the water skiers did not like the lake level as high. It would reverberate, the waves would reverberate off of bulkheads when it was higher, and it wasn't favorable for water skiing. And so it's right about that 1950s, 1960s that we started seeing some control of the lake level. It was when the drainage district was constructed. They were constructed in the 1950s, again, active in the 80s. In 1998, they replaced the weir that was there, and that's what the current weir that we have now. They did that replacement, and they actually operated the weir with a maintenance HPA. An HPA is a hydraulic project approval issued by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. They operated with an HPA. The drainage district dissolved and the city then took over the operations of the weir. And we have been operating the weir based on this lake level management plan that was written and updated in 2011. The lake level management plan sets target elevations for the summer and the winter. In summary, we put the boards in the spring, the lake level comes up, it stays up as high as it can until it's either not flowing out, and then evaporation is controlling the level when we don't have any inputs as rain in the summer months. And then come fall, we take all the boards out and we just let the water flow freely. And then we have no kind of control of it. And so around that time in 2020, we were really starting to see a lot of flooding happening downtown. And there was this need to understand why. What can we do with the lake level to control the flooding around the lake? There was a study that was published in 2020, and from that study, there was a couple of infrastructure upgrade options, which we'll kind of touch on here in a minute. And then in 21, we did some channel maintenance, and that maintenance looked in the form of removing a lot of vegetation that had just accumulated in the channel over time. And it also looked at clearing a lot of the sandbars that had developed there in the channel and actually being able to remove that last board in the weir, which I'm not sure how long it actually had been in there. So that's just some history. When I talk about this, the outlet channel, it's really kind of part of this bigger picture of what's the relationship between the Lake Stevens outlet channel, Catherine Creek, and the historic Lower Stevens Creek. This has been a map that I've shown in previous presentations, but down here, this red line, this is approximate historic flow path of Lower Stevens Creek. The green is the existing outlet channel. And we have kind of a series of projects that are represented here on this map of infrastructure that could use improvement to help with the flooding. The weir has really been targeted as a priority project because we have water that's actually circumnavigating the concrete abutments now and just moving away from the weir, and it's moving underneath North Lakeshore Drive. So there's a concern about undercutting North Lakeshore Drive and compromising the road. It also doesn't really provide much control or use if it's going to go around. And so that's why we've started looking at the weir first. So where are we now? I mentioned that we had this lake outlet study. It identified a series of projects. We did this channel maintenance. Then we started looking at some hydraulic and hydrologic models to figure out what is that relationship between the channel and the lake. We looked at a series of different options, and we did some conceptual designs for all of the projects just shown on the previous screen. And really where we're at today is we're trying to decide on a design that meets all the requirements by not just our community, but also by our agency stakeholders. And agency stakeholders meaning the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Tulalip tribes, the Department of Ecology, Army Corps of Engineers. Those are the primary environmental ones. So what did the channel modifications do for us? It's probably pretty hard for you to see this, but I hope it's in your packet. This blue line is a simulated lake level based on the geometry of the outlet channel and the inputs, so it flows into the lake. It's the simulated lake level for 10 years, from 2019 to 2021. It's just a little over 10 years. And the orange line is actually what that lake level is with the channel modifications. And I think we've all noticed that. So in 2021, we made those channel modifications. We did the dredging, we did the debris clearing, and we haven't seen water over Hartford in the last 2 years. We haven't seen water over 18th Street in a couple years as well, at least not significant. We still have water over 20th, but we're not driving through puddles. We're closing the sidewalk a couple times a year, but we're not seeing those huge impacts. So what we've already done just as terms of maintenance of this channel and some kind of preventative measures, we've already seen a huge impact to that lake level. And so when we talk about, you know, what is it that we need to do downtown? We need to maintain the lake level for recreation, but we also need to try to mitigate flooding. We've already really done a lot to help with the flooding. So what does that mean? What does that tell us? The takeaways from the modeling is really showing us that the geometry and the shape of the channel, the outlet channel, is what is controlling the flow out of the lake. Now, that seems maybe kind of obvious. Before we were really looking at, is there something with the weir? Can we change the weir to allow more water out of the lake? And the answer is no. It's really just the channel's pretty flat. It's really at a confined shape because of the road and the infrastructure and the way it was constructed. And so it is the controlling factor. And so when we talk about needing a new weir, we don't really need that weir to mitigate flooding because it doesn't do anything for it now. It's the channel itself. And so that's kind of important to keep in mind. So we looked at it. Oh, and if there's any questions, feel free to stop me. So we looked at a couple different options. We've looked at an automated weir, kind of a fixed weir system or like a fixed berm. No weir at all. That's kind of our baseline level of natural conditions. Possibly just stabilizing our current weir and the road. And then we looked at a couple other weir options that really they weren't feasible. And so we're going to primarily focus this conversation on those first four options. And how we've gotten to the place we are now, we've had several stakeholder meetings. We've had multiple meetings here on site. We've had our agency stakeholders here. We've had numerous discussions. We've done a lot of modeling. The last meeting we had here in June. It was a workshop meeting, several hours long, where we had the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Tulalip tribes in the room with us and our consultant. And we really started to work through what are the requirements of the weir. So originally we set out on this journey of a new weir to identify how can we, one, fix potential road issues, how can we mitigate flooding, and how can we still maintain the lake level for recreation. So we've already kind of identified the weir doesn't mitigate flooding. So when we've already looked at it's the channel itself, recreation is important to the city, but it's not a requirement for our agency stakeholders. And really what they're concerned about is what is the flow in and out of the lake? Can it support fish? Can it support migration of fish? What's the temperature of the water? Can that support the migration of fish? Can it enhance the habitat? Can they move through a new structure? And so those are the main requirements. We did an exercise where we looked at what is a requirement, meaning regulatory, what's kind of non-negotiable, and what would be a preferred condition. And we did this for the Tulalip tribes, the city, and WDFW. And we looked at those because we really wanted to be able to point back to that and say, this option does not meet the requirement. And so maybe that's not going to work. And this exercise was really important because we have been kind of going back and forth on a new weir option and, what is even feasible. And so that's why we primarily did this exercise. It really comes down to three key parameters, and that's the lake level, the stream temperature, and the velocity. So I have a series of graphs here to explain to you, and probably the most relevant ones are going to be around lake level, because that's what we hear from our community, that there's a concern of lake level, and especially in the summer months. And so this is a model that was done for a 10-year period. This is using the channel geometry from the current state, meaning it was dredged and the debris was cleared. And we have four options here. We have an automated weir in the dark orange. We have the observed stage. So what are we seeing now over the last 10 years in that light orange? We have a no weir, which is just a natural condition. And then we have a fixed weir option, which is the berm. Now, I put these two black lines on here of summer elevation target and winter elevation target. That refers back to that 2011 lake management plan. And those were the targets. So as you can see, we never actually really hit those targets. That lake level management plan, I like to say it's kind of written like a thermostat, and water doesn't actually act like a thermostat. It says, this month we will be at this elevation and this month we will be at this elevation, and natural process doesn't usually like that kind of confinement. But so in the simulation, we actually haven't reached that. I did plot that elevation though against recent data from 2019 to 2024 that's looking at a little bit more granular data. And we can see in months and years where we have high spring precipitation, we are able to reach that target elevation. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at a model and you're looking at averages and you're looking over a long span period. So the important thing to note about this is let's look at the options. So you have this observed state and you have a high lake level, you have spring that comes, and then slowly the lake level tapers off because we don't have any inputs. The weir is controlling the flow, but only so much. We know water's going around it, water's going over it to a certain extent. And then it doesn't pick back up again until the winter months. The thing to note here is this kind of no weir and berm option. It holds the berm option holds the lake level kind of more at like a steady state. So it would be set at a fixed elevation and water would either flow over it, or if the water level got down to the elevation of the berm, then it wouldn't, the only thing controlling it would be evaporation at that point. And so that berm would kind of hold it at that equilibrium. This is actually the preferred method by the Tulalip tribes in Fish and Wildlife. And and I know
It's the same look I get.
yeah. So let me explain why.
Okay, that'd be really good. I'm interested.
Let me explain why. The thought is that it tries to mimic more of a natural state. A berm could be, as what we're thinking of is just kind of like a large pile of dirt, but it could also be more of a habitat feature that just raises the elevation. So it could be a roughened channel, it could be large woody debris, it could be something that raises the elevation of the channel so that you can maintain recreation still in the lake, but mimics more of a natural state. And when I say natural state, that's because when we start to look at temperature and we start to look at where's the temperature get high enough in the outlet channel that it's lethal to fish or doesn't support habitat for them. And in that temperature, in that time frame when it does that, and that's typically our summer months, would the channel have naturally gone dry in its natural state? And what we've found in the modeling is yes, it probably would, or it would probably have such low flow that it really wouldn't support the passage of fish. And therefore, it is accepted to not have any flow because that's what you would maybe see in a natural state. So that's why this kind of fixed weir option is their preferred option. What does that mean for us though? That means that we're not storing water way up here so that when we get less of an input of precipitation, we can kind of meter it out and keep it up at a higher elevation longer. It means that we're kind of always trying to meet this equilibrium of a certain elevation. We can't put that elevation at our target elevation because then we would run into winter flooding. So it has to be, the berm would have to be at an elevation to where we could still support recreation on the lake, but it's not the pinch point or the confining factor of the channel, which would then cause flooding in the winter. The channel would still be the control factor for winter flows, but the berm would allow the elevation of the lake to stay higher. So it's kind of a lot. There's a lot of graphs. So is there any questions on that so far? Yeah.
You were talking about that mimicking the natural feature and then saying that the temperature in the summer would exceed any fish passage. The fish aren't moving in the summer though, correct?
That's what they're saying, yeah.
You're correct.
So I guess what difference does it make what the temperature is if the fish aren't?
The concern is that by altering the lake level and essentially storing water and releasing that water at that higher temperature, you're then discharging warm water into the system. And if in the natural condition you didn't have a weir and you weren't holding that water, you wouldn't have the potential to take the warm water from the top of the lake and put it into the system.
So they would rather have no fish traveling, so no water,
Instead of dead
than
fish.
have a little bit of water that's too high.
The fish don't travel in August.
Right.
Right.
So I guess I'm a little confused hearing you say, because it looks under their requirements, they want to maintain temperatures in the range fish can tolerate. But it sounds like what you're presenting is inconsistent with that.
No, that you're correct. They want to maintain temperatures that fish can tolerate. But we don't, I mean, in our summer months, the water exceeds the temperature that fish can tolerate. It's this range of like 65 degrees to 70 degrees. And we see temperatures in the upper part of the lake that already start to exceed that, starting sometimes in June.
So
That's only the top 2 feet though.
And that's what's flowing down the outlet channel. So that's what the concern is.
So the idea is July, August, so wouldn't be any water in the outlet channel.
And fish aren't moving anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And they're not moving anywhere.
So is it those vertical colored bars? That's what matters. That's where the temperature is important.
Yes.
So is it drying up now? Because I walk past it a lot, the one in Hartford, and sometimes there's no water in it in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, it does dry up. So last year we we didn't even have the lake flowing into the outlet channel. The lake elevation was just below. We had kind of a sand berm out there. So when we don't have a lot of heavy spraying or any precipitation in the summer, we do see portions of it drying out. We do get some like groundwater exchange though in the outlet channel. So we have some water coming in from the wetlands there on Hartford, and there will be some flows independent of the lake. But yeah, at some point, like, you know, we do hit some drier levels in our current state.
So I'll be honest, I'm sitting here waiting for the but, because this sounds like a cheaper option that makes everybody happy. What's the trade-off?
Oh, well, I'm glad that you're feeling that.
That was choreographed, right?
Good job.
Before you
No.
go,
Oh.
that's a question.
Yeah,
We had, for a long time, we had the aerator out there. It was
Correct.
basically mixing the water all year long. So do we have any kind of historical temperatures of the lake during the operation of the aerator and the difference of what the temperatures of the lake are now without the aerator?
we do have that data. I would have to dig that up and I could pull that up. Us putting in another aerator though is probably not a preferred option.
I wouldn't know.
I mean, there's been other things suggested of, well, why don't we pull the water from the bottom of the lake and put it into the outlet? And I don't think that we want to necessarily explore that. And Councilmember Donahue, you're absolutely correct. A fixed berm option or a fixed weir would be cheaper to install. It's supported by our agencies, and so it would be likely easier to permit. It would be obviously easier to maintain because we wouldn't necessarily be maintaining it, except for maybe to some extent every 5 or so years if it starts to degrade. And it kind of gives us a little bit more time to, look at some other options. We're going to see what happens. We still have a plan to reroute the outlet channel north of Hartford through the wetland area. So how does that impact the system? And so once we maybe learn more about the system, there may be opportunity to revisit the weir. The but though is the lake level. So if you look at this graph here and you look at that berm option in blue, if you look at our observed, so what do we see now in that kind of yellow color? June. we go into June at a higher lake level because we put the boards in March, April. With that berm option, we're essentially going to reach that steady state elevation sooner, and we're going to reach it sooner in the year. So we're going to see that lower lake level than we see now earlier in the year. And that's the difference. Now, you likely wouldn't get the lower lake levels like we see now because the overall elevation of the channel would be higher. Right now, it can get all the way down to the elevation of the channel that we see. And so you would always kind of keep it at that higher elevation. And then the only thing controlling the lake level at that point would be evaporation. So that's the trade-off.
What's the lake level right now today?
A couple days ago, it was at 211.75. So that's what I mean by these targets though, too, that we have set in our lake level management plan.
So 2/3.
Oh, sorry. Let me, I need to clarify something for you. So our lake level management plan, it's in NGVD 29 datum. All of the modeling is done in the NAVD 88 datum. That just means starting at a reference point. So there's a little bit of a conversion there. So 211.75 is 214.8 in this graph. So right about there at that target level.
So,
And we've had a pretty wet spring.
so the berm would drop it 2 inches from where it is now.
Yes.
Who do I get calls from if we drop the water 2 inches? Who calls me? Gary?
No.
Or I could ask that maybe a slightly different way. What activities and ability with the lake do we lose in that scenario?
So none, except for the challenges we usually have is we have docks built around the lake and we have boat lifts built around the lake at all different elevations. And so some may have challenges and some may not. I guess the important thing to hear is really where we start to have the problems is August, when we kind of don't have control at that point. If we don't have precipitation coming in, we don't have anything to raise the lake level. We kind of do get to an equilibrium point with our current weir just because so much water flows around it. And so that's really where we get those calls. In this fixed berm state, the theory is you wouldn't get to that lowest level because the lowest level would now be higher, if that makes sense.
Will it affect the health of the lake?
No.
What was your question, Councilmember?
Would it affect the health of the lake? You know, would 2 inches change the amount of algae that's growing, any of the little microorganisms that are balancing the ecosystem of the lake?
No, we have a 1,000-acre lake. We have a really large lake. We have a relatively small outlet channel. That channel itself doesn't promote like any kind of mixing or movement of the lake that you may think that kind of helps bring oxygen into the environment where you wouldn't have maybe as much algae production, but that's not a factor in this case. It wouldn't change anything to the lake as far as like the current status of it.
Hey, Shannon, so when I look at the blue line between July and September, why wouldn't it drop more? Because that's during your evaporation time, right?
Yeah, I think in this model, it does take into account evaporation, but over such a large lake, I'm not sure that you're going to see that granular of a change necessarily here in this graph.
So based on the berm, you're saying that the lowest the lake would go is 213.5.
Whatever we set that berm elevation at, there's still some work that can be done to kind of figure out, can we get that berm elevation a little bit higher, or what's that sweet spot? Because we want to make sure that we then support the recreation in the summer, but we also want to make sure that we don't actually cause more flooding in the winter because we can't get as much water out of the lake. And so there is It is possible. We've already run these models. We've identified that that is still possible to have a fixed weir and not cause the peak flooding.
So could there be a hybrid model of that where there's a bypass that you could open if it does cause the flooding and we can't get the lake level down?
That's something we could look at. We kind of get into this situation though, if you're gonna have a bypass, then you come into the summer and then we say, okay, well, that bypass, we wouldn't want water to necessarily flow out because then we're gonna drop below that elevation of the berm and then we're damming a
I was
bypass.
Thinking of a mechanical adjustable bypass so we could shut it.
It's possible. We run into somewhat of the same challenges of the mechanical weir we have now where it's not natural. It's how do we define the parameters to meet all the requirements? How do we permit the operation of those parameters to meet all those requirements? So there's a lot of. So before we get a little too far, let me bring up the other issue that we've kind of run into potentially. The question did come up at this meeting of what authority does the city have to even maintain the lake level? We do not have any court decision that says we must maintain the lake level per our lake level management plan. This has always just been something as a presented in the history that it's just kind of happened and done. And Fish and Wildlife used to permit the operations. I mean, they haven't really in the past since then. It's really the Department of Ecology that permits the storage of water, which this is what it would be considered. We've reached out to the Department of Ecology. We've also spoken with Greg, and we're still kind of exploring of what authority does the city have. The potential benefit to this kind of berm option or fixed weir option is it could possibly be looked at as more of a, like I mentioned, a roughened channel or some sort of habitat enhancement that, consequently helps raise the elevation of the lake, but is not considered storage of water in the lake.
I guess
So that's an unknown to us.
I'm just looking at the challenges under the weir alternative summary, and it looks like a couple options that the city might prefer. Seem like there's greater challenges with getting approval than, ecology and Fish and Wildlife. I see a couple of them that says like automated weir that ecology and Fish and Wildlife. I mean, Fish and Wildlife said they cannot permit the operation of the weir. So I mean, is that something that can be mitigated, or is that like just like, hey, and I don't see anything on here about the tribes, and I imagine the tribes have at least equal say in that with ecology and Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, so the automated weir option, the tribes do not support that option. Fish and Wildlife, the challenge they have is they can permit a structure, but they can't permit the operation. And so essentially, if we're saying an automated weir can meet all the fish passage requirements by defining the operation of that weir, in Fish and Wildlife's permitting process, they're saying we can't permit your operations, and therefore the structure you're proposing is a barrier to fish passage, and we cannot permit barriers to fish passage because it's not a barrier dependent on how we operate it. So there are challenges. There's things we can work through. I think with the automated weir, the big unknown still is, does the city have authority to store the water? And if so, if the answer is yes, there may be an easier permitting path as far as with the environmental agencies, Fish and Wildlife, and the Tulalip tribes to look at something and figure out how we could make an automated weir system work. And so that's something that we're still working on and part of the next step.
So really quick, I just want to go back to something because so in the fixed weir, you list as one of the challenges, lower lake elevation. And if I go back to that graph with the yellow, orange, yeah, that one. Okay, so I see what you're saying, the blue line drops lower sooner, but if I recall, did you say August is usually when the calls start about the low lake level? That looks to be right about the time the blue line would save us from going to the point of people being unhappy.
You're right. So it's that change early on in the spring that you start to see that may be some adjustments, an adjustment period. But yeah, in modeling theory here, your elevation would be set higher than it is now. So your lake level wouldn't get to the elevation that it is now because it'd always be set at that higher elevation.
And I guess my thinking is if people don't become unhappy till it drops in August, how big of an adjustment is it really going to be? It sounds like people are historically already fine with a lower lake level, just as long as it doesn't drop below that traditional August level.
I think in general, yes, there's still, even if we have a really dry spring and we have a really dry summer, the lake level will probably actually drop below the elevation of the outlet channel, and then it would be low like we see it now.
So,
And the berm wouldn't necessarily do
so if you
anything.
had that blue line, the lake would be fine. When if you're about 2 inches higher, the north end, they start breaking their docks. And if you get about 2 inches lower than that, then folks on the east side can't get their boats in. But that'd be fine. I think, as far as levels.
Yeah, I think it is kind of that happy medium. There would be that adjustment of that expectation of coming, into the spring really high to kind of save water for August. And that's what you kind of see in this automated. So this is that dark orange, and where you see it kind of elevated is because you're essentially saving more water there. You're kind of reaching on that, the people in the north end getting a little bit worried about the high lake level in the spring, but you're kind of holding all that water and then releasing it at a slower rate so that you can store more of it for that August timeframe and have a higher lake level in that August timeframe. That's what this automated weir is showing us, but that's where we start to run into those questions of, are we storing water and then we're releasing too warm of water into the channel? Are we allowed to store water to that capacity? Is the rate, the velocity of the water through the orifice of the weir, is it too high for fish to even pass it? And so that's where we start to kind of run into some of these challenges with the automated system.
Well, and even before that, it sounds like the permit to even do that is an issue. So those all seem to be issues, assuming we can get off the ground with that.
Yeah, and as I stated, the biggest unknown right now for us is, do we have the authority to even store the water? The answer to that might make this path a little bit clearer and give us some more options. But yeah, at this current state.
Can we get that answer?
Yeah, we've reached out to the Department of Ecology. We're also working with Greg to see what is the city's precedent, since we've been doing this for a long time, and I just don't have that answer today.
And I had a question on the automated where it looks like it's pretty high, and is there the ability so that the people whose docks don't do well with it that high, is there the ability to take that and lower it to something else? Since it's an audit, in other words, can we control where that line goes?
Yes, we can. We can to an extent of operationally. We have to monitor temperature, and we have to monitor velocity through that weir to make sure that the biggest challenge is, if it got really high, you would hope that we would have a lot of input, and so we wouldn't have the high temperatures. But the biggest challenge that we're running into now with that is, if you're holding water and it gets to be summer and that water gets hot and you're trying to release that water and put it downstream, then that's a violation of the Clean Water Act, because you're putting hot water in the system.
As far as affecting the kokanee, is there any impact on that with any of these models? So we're one of the few lakes in this area that has that.
No, and we don't expect really to see the kokanee moving too much, and when upstream and downstream, and when they would run, we expect to have enough water through the channel and at the right temperature. when Fish and Wildlife permit, it's not just permitted specifically for when the salmon migrate, it's all aquatic life of all life stages, and so it's anything. So I guess some of to sum it up, we've had several of these meetings with our stakeholders. This is just an update of where we're at now. You know, I really just wanted to get a take from the council on would a fixed berm or fixed weir option or something like that be something that we would, you know, consider and that we're open to, given the changes in the lake level that you've seen on the graphs. And then just one other update I wanted to give, the mayor and I, Public Works Director, we met with the Tulalip tribes back in March, and they presented a funding opportunity to us to partner with them on some of these larger federal grants to really explore the historic alignment of the outlet channel. And so that's something that we're working with them to kind of partner and see if we can get some maybe larger funding opportunity to explore what would that look like and is it feasible. We also have been working with the Tulalip tribes. They're doing some work. They want to do some 2D hydraulic modeling of that historic outlet channel. So that's something that they're looking at just at a high level to see, is it feasible to even consider.
So when we talk about the weir in this project, are we able to, if we were to open the original outflow, maintain that same lake level?
I don't know at this point. That would have to be something that we factor into the design of that. And that would probably also look something similar to setting an elevation.
So, seeing how you're the manager of all of this, what's your recommendation at this point?
I do recommend that we move forward and do a little bit more modeling on this fixed berm option and see if we can see what does that look like and what does that look like for habitat enhancement, and can we make sure that we place it somewhere in the channel that we're not going to have flooding in the winter, and moving forward with that into permitting and then getting some official comments back on it and permitting. I think it's an option that's financially feasible. I think it's supported. So getting through the permitting phase is something that's going to be much easier to move forward with. But, you know, we do want to make sure that we're still listening to our community and we're considering the lake level there in the summer, and we're not going to.
So in your opinion, if we were to actually go forward with going to the historical outlet channel alignment, would we basically block that area a little bit?
It's a good question. We don't know. We would have to really see, can we get the full flow of the outlet channel to go in that historic flow path? Or would we need some sort of maybe secondary like bypass? And that would be the existing one. That's still an unknown. The biggest challenge we have is those apartment complexes there on 20th Street. They're really in that perfect flow path. And so could we get enough of the flow around those in that wetland area to help support the wad of water that we need to come out of the lake in the winter months? And would we need some sort of high flow bypass? And would that high flow bypass look like our existing channel? I don't know that right now, but if we didn't need it, then we would not need that existing channel there.
But you'd also be talking about infrastructure. As far as
Absolutely.
bridges, at least 2 bridges, maybe 3 bridges.
Yeah, 1, 2,
Which
3.
Yeah, which the cost goes up way high. So Shannon, one time, I guess with this non-weir option, and you talk about habitat restoration, could that be facilitated within the channel width? Or are we talking, we're going to have to do some other things as far as widening the channel to get this habitat restoration? And I just bring this up because at one time there was a thought process that we close North Lake Drive there, get rid of 113th and run the road up basically right over here up to 20th. Just kind of X that area out. Is that something that would be needed?
That's not what's being considered at this time. When we talk about habitat restoration, we're talking about adding shade to the channel to help bring the water temperature down. adding features to the channel like large woody debris that help provide safe haven during high flows for juveniles, fish, that bring in, organisms and stuff for food for aquatic species. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be to the extent, at least not in this current plan, to take out the road or come more into North Cove Park.
Okay.
So I have what's maybe a foolish question, given the name Fixed Weir. But if we can forecast a particularly dry summer coming, how easy, and maybe this depends on what type of fixed weir, but how easy would it be to potentially add elevation as kind of a stopgap against a one-off, really hot, really dry summer to protect the level of the lake?
It likely wouldn't be an option in that. It would be a set elevation. And that's really the questions and the challenges we come to is, when you have that option of like, oh, we are expecting a really dry spring. And so can we hold more water to save it for, later? That's where you come up with this automated function. And are you still maintaining fish passage? And if we have lower flows and you build it up, then you've eliminated fish passage. So it kind of comes back to that automated weir question. But it was a good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you done any cost analysis as to what the different options are?
We haven't put cost to all these different options yet. A new automated weir is probably around $1 million, and a fixed berm option could probably be $500,000 or less. That's just really off the top of my head. I did not put any engineering thought into it.
We're gonna hold you to it.
I will say this, the discussion we had with the tribes and everybody that we talked to in March, they're very, very committed in helping us out on the money side. There's a lot of money out there right now, a lot of federal money out there for this sort of thing. And they were very committed in helping us.
Well, and I guess that kind of leads to the habitat restoration question as to, to what extent would that be required? And so we may be talking a fixed weir of $1 million and we end up spending $1.5 million doing habitat restoration. So.
Yeah, anytime we do any kind of like work in the channel and stuff, there's a mitigation component tied to it. Like, for example, when we did the dredging and we removed that sandbar there, we did a lot of native plantings along the shoreline in North Cove Park. That's kind of part of it. So we would look at ways of enhancing that channel, really in trying to bring shade to the channel, because we get pretty high temperatures there. We also start to see a lot of vegetation growth, particularly in that kind of long, hot, sunny stretch, right as you go parallel to Hartford. I mean, we have a lot of curly leaf pondweed in there right now, which then slows the flow in the winter. It's an invasive plant too. But if you look at areas where we have really dense shade, we don't see it. So bringing in shade and features to the channel to just protect the health of the water.
And I think before we can really go any further, we need to answer the question, can we store water?
Yeah, that
Right.
really is our big unknown at this point.
Yeah, that could add expense really fast too, if we get that wrong. So, I don't know if Greg, I'm imagining if somebody takes issue with that down the road, that could get expensive pretty quick.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Shannon. That was a
thank you.
good presentation.
Very good.
Thank you. Finance Director Stevens, you're up.
Thank you, council members. Let me go ahead and get this up. Speaking of expense. Okay, we are looking at budget amendment number 2 for our 2024 budget year. Some of these things on my way. Okay, so we are looking at our budget amendment number 2. As you can see, not nearly as significant as our first budget amendment of the year. We are looking at increasing our resources by approximately 1.3 million and increasing our expenditures by 622,000. These are the funds that are affected by this second budget amendment. Those that are not affected are not included in this slide. We'll jump right into the details. These are in your packet. So The first one we have here is the Lundin sign replacement. I did add some budget in here. Council discussed this and authorized this recently. Additionally, Director Halverson brought forward the pavement preservation and mentioned that the unit prices are really good right now, so we added some additional area. We did increase that budget by about 100,000. Since we did not do any pavement preservation out of the transportation benefit program last year, we are going to take that funding out of it this year. So the amount is going to be the 600,000 out of the transportation benefit program, and then the additional 400,000 out of the street fund. So it should actually cover that. There may be some left over. We will just leave that in the fund at that point. Operationally, in the unemployment fund, we do have some payments to claimants. We do have a standard budget in there of about 15,000 per year. We are close to that at this point. So we are just adding additional placeholder funding into that for any additional that may occur later this year. And then the fourth one here is the Volunteers of America. This is their request for the additional for the $65,000 contribution. I did have that included in the budget amendment. If council decides they don't wish to move forward with that, I can pull that out. Down below that is just the explanation of the columns so that you have that information for you. Jumping into the grouped amendment details. This is a good one. This is all of our investment interest citywide over all of the funds. We are looking at increasing the budgeted amount by about 1.2 million to almost $3 million. We did anticipate a decrease in the investment interest this year. We thought rates were going to go down. So far, they're still stable in our LGIP. So we are increasing our budget accordingly. In the general fund, which is the top one, we are estimating an additional 400,000 this year from what we had originally budgeted. Training, we received some additional reimbursements from WCIA, so this accounts for the revenue and the expenditures. The road dock, council authorized the Parks Department to move forward with the replacement of the North Cove Road dock. We don't have specific costs on this or the allocation on the reimbursement. I know Director Garceau had mentioned estimated 30% contribution from the road club. Obviously, this calculation is different than that. It's just a placeholder at this point. So both of them are placeholders just to get it back into the budget so we have the funding to spend as we are ready. The next is the Guild contract. This was approved in April. The total cost increase was approximately 469,000 in 2024. When we adopted the budget, we did have a placeholder in that included potential cost of living increases. That placeholder was 219,000 and absorbed a good portion of that increase. So the increase on this budget amendment is about $250,000. Obviously, that is all in general fund as that's where the police is funded. And then the ViewWorks, the facility assessment, this was also authorized by council in May, and it is allocated amongst the funds. The budget increase on this is $67,930. That was the majority of your details. Council did ask to look at the financial forecast for the general fund. So I did put it in here, got everything updated and showing what the change was by amendment. Excuse me. The green line is what the original budget looked like once we knew what 2023 actuals were. The first budget amendment is the orange. And if you'll remember, the first budget amendment is generally the largest. That one includes prior year roll forwards and some operational cost increases that we determined better estimates based on prior year actuals. The L&I workers' comp insurance, that one was an increase to the general fund of about $100,000. And then, of course, the Teamsters contract for the parks portion. So that was what was in your first one. And then the blue is our current, which includes the largest portion, which is the Guild change. we did talk about showing this to show what the difference of the Volunteers of America additional 65,000 would be. I did not include that in the line as it's extremely close to the current, as it's a one-time expenditure. So it just decreases that by about the $65,000. So it's actually, I just didn't add it. So it's very little effect on the forecast. And then just looking at this financial forecast, it does cross below the threshold in 2028. This does assume the entire budget is spent every year. Historically, the revenues ended slightly higher than expected and expenses are less just due to postponement of purchases and projects and open staff positions. So historically, we generally do better than this forecast looks. So just keep that in mind. I just wanted to find out from council, do we want to move forward with the 65,000 to the Volunteers of America? Is that something that you want me to leave in this budget amendment as I bring it forward next week? Or is that something you want to discuss more?
I'm supportive of it.
I guess my only thing, and this is maybe more of a question for us at large, but it's in as a one-time expenditure, but I think we also were asked for some money last year. So is it going to be a one-time expenditure every year?
We can talk about that during the regular budget and you guys want to up it and
And it may be looking at a full like human services budget and then go out for applications, that type of thing. We had that many years ago. And then we haven't had that in a while. We've just kind of gone as our status quo with the senior center and then again, adding the one-time additional payments. We did have the large, obviously, payment to the food bank too, that we did a couple of years ago, so.
Well, I think that what you just said, going into the budget area and trying to come up with that human services line item or whatever it is probably a good idea. I've shied away from that in the past years, but with things that are happening. When Volunteers of America, all that money being spent here in our city. It's helping our citizens that are in dire straits. So I don't have a problem with this line item. And I also don't have a problem going forward, looking at this as a budget issue in 2025, 2026.
I remember when it was discussed prior, the question was still the guild. We didn't have a contract yet for our police and that's been settled now. So that question mark's gone.
So I guess for me, in attending AWC, I noticed there was a city that was able to partner in a similar way with the city and with, human services agencies to create like a synergy between those. And so, if there's a way for us to do that with any of the human services organizations in the community, seems like that would be a good opportunity because I think the city is a great partner. Volunteers of America is a great partner, and Senior Center. We have a lot of good partners in the community. If there's any way that we can do that, I certainly would like to consider that.
Yeah, we'll bring that back during the budget cycle and show what our contributions are to, it's not just the monetary contributions, it's, the facilities and the maintenance and things that we are supporting other entities, and we want to make sure you guys have a full picture of what we are providing, what you are providing to the citizens out there. And so have that in your mind when we're going through and deciding what to actually use monetarily as well.
I guess I look at the food bank and see like how, we made our contribution, we got funding from the state, we got from the county and, but our contribution kind of, got the ball rolling there. And so, I can see that happening in other areas and other, areas that we're trying to impact.
And same with the museum moving forward. We're
Great example.
contributing a lot to the museum as well.
Is all of the ARPA money and all the COVID resources gone?
They are allocated to Frontier Park. There's a number of capital projects that they're already allocated to. I believe there's.
So if you're asking if ours is, it's all out. But I think there's some others still out there at the state level that will do something ours that might. If that's what you're thinking.
There is some that is still to be allocated. I think it's a little over $1 million. That is still sitting as placeholders for, is that for the museum? Is that for the city hall? Is that those kind of things? Our cost overage is going to be covered by on some of these large projects. Obviously, we had to take additional for Frontier Heights because that one came in pretty high on the quote. And so we increased the budget on that one from those funds as well.
Quick question, what's your reasoning for the downs, little bit of a downslide in 25 on the forecasted revenues?
Actually, go back and look. It doesn't include grants and things. So all the one-time grants, we had a lot of grants. Even in the general fund, we have a lot of professional services grants, the comp plans, my brain is not working. The climate ones, we had a number of fairly large grants in commerce from commerce that obviously we're not going to assume we're getting in future years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So do I have a head nod on the 65,000 for the Volunteers of America for 2024? Okay.
Yeah.
So our next steps, I did add this. This is not in your packet, but I will bring back the budget amendment for action on the consent agenda on the 9th. And I will include the updated organizational chart reorganizing the Public Works Department to add the facilities division and reclassify the staff position as directed by council tonight. So I won't add any dollar amount budget at this time, as we think there are likely budget savings just from open positions. I'll keep an eye on it later in the year. And if we need to come back and add any funding for this specific purpose, then I'll bring that forward.
Thank you.
So I had a question backing up to facilities minutes. When you brought this to us a couple of weeks ago or whenever it was there, I don't remember, was it budgeted for equipage and vehicles and that kind of stuff in there also, and that's going to be included in our budget amendment?
We currently have the one facilities, that's our one full electric fleet that has been dedicated just to the facilities folks. So we shouldn't be requesting any other facility.
You don't need any more tools or anything like that?
Nothing that would be a substantial purchase. And I don't anticipate would be looking to get any extra fleet because of it.
You'd be jealous. So what it feels like, man. Does it have a ladder on top?
It's not that cool.
The ladder's inside, but it's on top.
If it's a van with a ladder on top, I'd be really happy because I get the cheap off my butt.
Okay, thank you, council. I'll bring that back next week.
What's that?
No.
You-
Certainly.
Yes, because mine's dead. Okay, Mayor, Council, good evening. 2 council meetings left before the recess. We've got next week, July 9th, and then July 16th. And July 16th will be a special meeting because it is stacking up with quite a few things we need to take care of before the recess. So wanted to go over next week's meeting on the 9th. We've got the comp plan briefing. We've got several employee introductions. We'll have this budget amendment on consent as well as the facility division revisions. Russ has a real estate broker contract. And then the opioid settlement agreements as well on consent. Am I saying it wrong?
No, I just said Barb's going to be my proxy.
Oh, okay, great. So, and then looking at July 16th, I just mentioned that'll be a special meeting. It's stacking up with quite a few items to take care of again before the recess. So it's gonna throw out to all of you tonight, if need be, can I contact you to maybe start early that night? Would that be an option to start at 5 or 5:30, just so we don't go too late? Or would you rather just start at 6 and we'll end when we end? Throwing it out as an option, but
I think Brian might have a problem, or Ryan might have a problem getting here earlier.
okay,
And you'd have to talk with them, but I don't have a problem.
And same with Angie. I think she might have a problem.
okay, I'll check with them. I was just gonna mention it. Maybe it'll all work out okay. I think we'll know more next week, but
I'd prefer 6 o'clock also.
Yeah,
you prefer 6?
Yeah.
Okay,
just bring some snacks. We'll call
okay.
it a late night.
Yeah.
Little late, but then we'll have a break. So,
Late nighter.
okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for helping us celebrate our 49th wedding anniversary on Thursday.
All right.
4th of July?
Wow.
Congratulations.
You're gonna be down here, right?
No,
No?
I'm gonna be gone.
Good for you.
Yeah.
The heck?
At ease.
That's it. We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.